Good afternoon. This is the Finance and Audit Committee regular meeting for Thursday, April 27, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we will start with the public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within the committee's scope, including items on or not on the agenda. And do we have any speakers?
We have no speakers this evening.
Thank you. We'll move on to the consent items. Do we have any questions on this? Oh, I guess we could. Well,
Right?
yeah, let's do a roll call if you want, please.
I mean,
No, that's good.
I missed it. Director Whitmer.
Present.
Director Clark.
here.
Director Wood.
Here. Thank you, sir. We'll move on to consent. Do I have any questions on the consent calendar?
No.
I'll take a motion or a
I
second.
so moved.
Second.
Thank you. We got a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Directors Weber,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
motion passed.
All right. And next, we'll move on to our presentation items. We have Mr. O'Toole giving us a report through February 28, 2023. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, directors, Fire Chief Haverty, colleagues, members of the public. Tonight, I will be presenting the bi-monthly fiscal report that covers the first 8 months of the fiscal year. That's through February 28th. And this is intended to help you monitor the fiscal health of the district. This presentation summarizes information in the most recent Finance Committee report, which you received with your agenda. And one important change to note with this presentation is that these bi-monthly fiscal reports always reference the most recently enacted budget.
Just can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
We'll speak up. Yeah, these bi-monthly fiscal reports are always referenced from the most recently approved budget, which is the mid-year budget in this case, which is a change from the last report, which we're referencing the final budget. So now that we've passed the mid-year, we'll be using that as the reference point for the presentation that follows. There we go. Okay, this chart shows general fund cash balance trends through the end of February this year. The red line is the current year and the green line is prior year, 21-22. At the end of February, cash balance was back in positive territory at 7.6 million. But you can see that the balances last year were quite a bit higher. That's $20 million higher. The main reason for that change since last year has to do with the IGT Voluntary Rate Range Program Fund, what we just formerly called the IGT Fund. At the end of February last year, we had not yet made the transfer to pull down those funds yet. That's about a $10 million payment. This year we have, so we're showing that expenditure, that reduction to our cash balance earlier, and that's about 10 million of that. Additional 3 million was 3 million what we had spent of IGT funds that we had spent earlier this year. So that would have been 3 million more easy in the cash balance last year. And then about 8 million, which is made up of a PERS payment, was $4 million higher. We pay that at the beginning of the year. That reduces our cash balance. Also, there were development impact fee funds that there was a larger balance last year of about 4 million. We used that during the 21-22, or we've since used that, I should say, to pay for Station 68 improvements. So another reduction in the cash balance gets you to the 20 million, around 20 million. For the next slide, we're looking at general fund total revenues. This shows that after 8 months, the district is tracking just under budgeted general fund revenues, which includes taxes, service charges, medic revenues, and transfers into the general fund. There are three colored lines on this chart. The green line is prior year. At the end of February last year, we were at 137.6 million in revenues. The red line is current year actual revenues. At the end of February, revenues were 145.8 million, about 8 million more than last year at this point. And the blue line is budgeted revenues as planned in the mid-year budget, tracking close to actuals. Budget revenues were about 2.9 million higher at this point. We're headed into our second income surge. As you know, you can kind of see on that chart, we have two property tax surges. So when that starts to be reflected in these reports, which is really this month and next month after tax season or tax day, that we'll begin to keep a closer eye to see how that matches up. Total projected budget revenues in the mid-year and shown on the chart are now 270 million, which is about 4 million higher than what we had in the final budget. So leaving this slide of general fund revenue trends, we'll take a look at a portion of these revenues. Medic revenues. It's their next slide there, medic revenue. So this slide shows medic revenues, also known as EMS revenues. In the mid-year budget approved last month, we recognized that EMS revenues were coming in lower than budget, not because of a decline in calls for service, but rather a decline in transports. The total reduction in mid-year budget was about 2.5 million in the mid-year budget. So this new revised annual budget amount is shown at the far right, which is 44.5 million. So in the final, it was almost 47. Now we're at 44.5 as adjusted in mid-year. Applying those adjusted numbers, actuals at the end of February, the red line, were below the new budgeted figure by about of 29.1 million. So they're below the blue line by 1 million. So and in February, we're 1 million below where we thought we'd be relative to the adjusted mid-year budget. So that's something we want to keep an eye on as well. The main explanation we have is that if you recall, the PPG EMT program started this year, and we've seen hospitals kind of struggling with the conversion to the payment, and it's taken a little longer to get payments in or into our provider who gets them to us. So we expect that to catch up and get resolved. But I think, as you know, we have a PPG EMT working group here, and who's been monitoring this issue and tracking the revenues and using our legislative policy, operational, and of course, fiscal tools available to monitor and advocate and ensure that we try to ensure that we get the payments as quickly and as appropriately as we can. So that's the slide showing medic revenues. So we'll leave the revenue pieces and revenue side of the equation and go to expenditure. This, after 8 months in the fiscal year, actual general fund expenditures relative to mid-year budget are about $4 million lower. The end of the red actuals line is below the blue line by that amount, 4 million. Actual expenditures at 175.7 million are also $4.2 million greater than prior year expenditures shown in the green line. The expenditures through February were equal to 65.3% of the total annual expenditure budget. So again, a little low under the consistent spending assumption. And that's your total expenditures slide. And taking a look at a component of that is labor costs. Labor costs make up 84% of the general fund budget this year. On this slide, actual costs, budgeted costs, and prior costs are trending very close together. It almost looks like one line, but I do have the numbers broken out and identified on the slide there. After 8 months, labor costs were 144.6 million, tracking $1.8 million higher than the mid-year budgeted number. Actual labor costs were $3.9 million more than the prior year number of 140.7 million after 8 months. And that's a summary of your labor costs through February. Next, we'll look at general fund reserves. This slide shows those reserves. Again, the green line is the prior year, red line is actuals for the current year. The yellow dotted line across the top, near the top there, is your 15% levels of reference. For the fiscal year as a whole, we followed a historical course. You can see with those two dips and 2 surges when the revenues come in, property tax mainly. However, at the end of February, reserves were 4.8 million, about 4 million more than last year. If this performance continues, we expect to finish where we budgeted to finish in mid-year at 13.4% reserve at the end of the fiscal year. That is the reserve picture. Next up is the CERT fund as of the end of February. CERT balances are not a cash fund, and monies in this are not can only be used to pay for future OPEB costs, which are mainly retiree-related health costs, of course. The total shown at the top, 70.3 million, is 4 million more than the last bi-monthly fiscal report, and it's made up of contributions over our life of participation in the fund and investment earnings. Since inception, the district has contributed nearly 55 million of that 70 million. And as you can see, if you look all the way to the right in the green area, earnings are picking up again in this report, not quite reaching the level we reached in the summer of 2021, but still pretty sharp increase. This fiscal year, we've contributed 2.6 million so far, and the fund has earned 1.5 million in market gains. So that's about a 67% return, even including the offsets for admin costs. We're now approaching 26% funded in the 10 years we've been contributing. So we're coming up almost our 10-year anniversary since we first contributed. And that is the CERT update. So just some takeaways that I would offer for this report through February 28th. Let's see, general fund cash is trending under February 2022, and now $20 million lower. We expect that gap to narrow as the IGT voluntary rate range program revenues are received in April and May this year. General fund revenue is 2.9 million lower than mid-year budget. That includes 1 million in EMS revenue lower than budget. General fund spending is 4 million lower than mid-year budget, even though labor is $1.8 million higher. CERT performance continues to improve. As I just said, we're now at 26% after 10 years, and dollar-wise was still short of the peak we reached in June 2021. And that concludes my presentation. This is a presentation item only. My recommendation is to receive and file. Take any questions.
Any questions from
I do.
the committee? Go ahead, Director.
Thank you. So on the medic slide revenues that you were speaking of, so with the 44, well, was it the 44 million? My question is, are you using the recovery rate of the 190, the lower number, or are we now factoring in the 920 number? And which one are you using?
Good question. Yeah, we are not using the PPGEMT number for this presentation because it hasn't started. That's one of those issues where, as of February, a lot of the hospitals had not switched over and were not adjusting their payments yet. So I can tell you the report I received through February, it was the total number was in the 100,000 or 200,000. I can get you the exact figure. It was very low. So there wasn't much to make up there. And of course, we had stopped receiving the GEMT quality assurance fee on December 31. So yeah, so if we as we expect to receive that PPGMT money, there would otherwise be a sharp uptick, because we're getting $900 more per transport. We expect that to shoot up. But we budgeted in the mid-year, we separated them out. So there wouldn't be that skew. You'd be able to see the PPGMT money in the IGT fund, not shown as medic revenues.
Right, and that would spike dramatically, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it would kind of skew the picture.
And I don't know what the number is that we average capture, whether it's 50%, 60, whatever the number is. I mean, I'm sure the administration and the staff can pull that number up, what the average is. Can we take a look at what the projections may be with the averages that we're able to capture?
Yeah, we use and we get from our billing provider the trip numbers, and then we use those trip numbers to forecast for mid-year, and when we come back with the preliminary budget, that's what we'll be using their numbers to.
Yeah, just like to see where we potentially could be. Curiosity fact, I mean, they'll be actuals when they come in, but it'd be good to, at least in my small melon, be able to take a look at that and look down the road. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks so much, Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Our next meeting is May 25th, 2023. We anticipate taking action and getting a presentation on the 2023-24 preliminary budget at that time. So look forward to that. Absent any other business, we will be adjourned until then. Thank you.
Yep.